The story begins under a large, ancient tree late at night in a quiet, secluded place. The air feels heavy, and the soft glow of the moon casts a silvery light over the scene. Elena kneels beside a wounded young man named Vicente, her hands trembling as she presses against his bleeding side in a desperate attempt to stop the flow. His breathing is ragged, and the stillness around them makes the moment even more heartbreaking. Elena's eyes glisten with unshed tears. She feels helpless, guilt gnawing at her heart. Her voice is shaky as she whispers an apology, feeling as if she has failed him. Before she can say more, Vicente gently squeezes her hand, stopping her words. His touch is warm despite the cold night, steady even as he weakens. He looks into her tear-filled eyes with a soft, reassuring expression. Vicente's telling Elena it's okay, that she's got nothing to apologize for, his voice barely above a whisper but packed with sincerity, and all he cares about is that she's safe, that he can handle anything as long as she's unharmed, and seeing her in one piece is all that matters to him. Elena's shaking her head, refusing to accept his words, the ache in her chest getting deeper, as she watches him struggle to stay awake, his fingers tightening around hers, urging her not to cry. His drawing strength from her presence, holding on like his life depends on it, and Elena's leaning in closer, resting her forehead against his, silently promising she won't let him go. Time seems to be standing still in that quiet, hidden spot under the ancient tree, the night holding its breath, cradling their shared sorrow and unspoken determination, and though darkness surrounds them, a spark of hope flickers in their intertwined hands, refusing to be extinguished. Suddenly Elena jolts awake in a dark room, looking around in fright, trapped in the hellish western tower, having the same dream every day, haunted by memories of her past, specifically her youthful days when she turned her back on the Empire's second prince, Vicente, but in her dreams, he's always saving her. She recalls being 8 years old, engaged to Vicente, but her dad, the Marquis of Castilla, made it clear the engagement meant nothing, that she was born to become an empress, and she remembers arguing with her dad, telling him how the crown prince, Castro, kept doing creepy things to her whenever they were alone, but her dad just shrugged it off, saying she had to keep her chastity intact, that if Castro lost power, she'd be married off to the third prince. Elena's eyes widen in shock as her dad drops the bombshell. She's trying to process the fact that he's okay with her marrying a 9-year-old prince. She reminds him that the third prince is way too young, but her dad cuts her off, saying he knows all about the age gap, but the emperor's been acting weird lately, showing favoritism to the third prince, making him think the throne might go to him instead. He's all like a man is still a man, no matter how young, and assures her she can do it easily, just like she did with the other 2 princes. Elena's mind is reeling, thinking about how naive she was to think she'd only have one fiancé, how her dad pushed her into the arms of the new crown prince, Castro, after dumping the second prince, and how she endured all the insults and violence from Castro. Now her dad's asking her to fall into the arms of a kid. It's all too much. Back to the present, Elena's lost in thought, wondering how far she'll fall, if anyone will lend her a hand in this hellish place. Just then, the door opens, and the male lead walks in, stretching out his hand, asking how she's doing, calling her Lady Castilla. Elena's all like, why are you still calling me that? Asking him to call her by her name instead, wondering if he's there to mock her, asking if it's because she's still alive. He smiles, saying he heard she hurt herself. Elena looks at him, a million thoughts racing through her mind. So basically, Elena's stuck in this tower because of her super anxious dad. And it all goes back to when she was kneeling in front of the emperor, who's all like, hey, I heard your family's been rebelling against the crown prince, and she's in big trouble, but the emperor's all merciful and stuff, saying he'll spare her life, but only if she agrees to be locked up in the West Tower forever, and oh, she also can't have kids. It's all part of some ancient oath, and she's all like, okay, fine, and from that day on, she's been drinking this medicine that's basically ruining her womb. And she's also dealing with Castro's violence. And he's all like, I'll forgive you for your dad's debt, and she's just trying to survive. So Elena's talking to the male lead, asking him if everyone outside thinks she's just hurting herself on purpose, and is all calm and reassuring, telling her not to worry, that he won't hurt her. And she's all like, yeah, sure, whatever. And the male lead comes closer, and she starts begging him to kill her, to save her from all the pain, and is all surprised, looking at her like she's crazy, holding her hands and telling her he's got two options for her. The first one being that he can help her escape, that he's got guards waiting for her outside, and he promises he can keep her safe. But she's all like, no way. I'm not leaving, the maidens' lives depend on me, and she asks him about the second option, curious about what he's got planned. The male lead is telling Elena not to explain anything else, but she's all like, if you really want to help me, just kill me, adding that she doesn't want to take advantage of anyone or be used, and is just quietly listening, then suddenly drops a tiny bottle into her hands, telling her it's poison that'll numb her pain and slowly stop her heart and breathing without any suffering, and she's just holding the bottle, thanking him, not really caring why he's helping her. Maybe it's because of their childhood connection, or to keep Castro in check. All she knows is she can finally die in peace. So she drinks the liquid and starts vomiting blood, getting weaker. But the male lead is holding her, and she's expressing her gratitude, telling him he's her salvation, that even if she's reborn, she'll never be able to repay him. So she's sharing her hope of happiness with him, and with that, she drops to the ground, closing her eyes, wishing the male lead happiness until the end, thinking his good intentions saved her from pain, and it's all destined to end quietly like this. But then she opens her eyes again, and she's in a completely different body, an orphan's body, in a different location, Benedict Abbey in the United Kingdom, living with a kind-hearted nun in a peaceful convent. And one morning, as she's getting ready to leave, the nun is watching her with a knowing smile. The air is fresh. Birds are singing, and the nun casually asks if she's heading to the city again, like she knows exactly what Elena's up to. Elena's nodding, mentioning she's got an important place to visit, and the nun's eyes light up with curiosity, teasing her about Carter finally asking her out, leaving her speechless. But the nun just chuckles, reassuring her it was just a joke, then asks if she'll be back for dinner, and Elena promises to return on time, leaving Cora in the nun's care, and the nun nods, trusting her completely, as Elena steps out into the unfamiliar streets, feeling the warmth of their shared moment lingering in her heart. She's still getting used to this new life, new face, new everything. It's been 2 years, but she still feels like she's dreaming, and she has no idea how she ended up in this body, or when she might lose it. So for now, she's living as Evelyn Benedict, trying to make the most of it. She walks into a bookstore, greeting Mr. Balmer, the bookseller, cheerfully handing over the manuscript she was working on, and his applauding her hard work, promising to pay her translation fee right away, but then drops a bombshell, saying someone's come to see her. A lady who's impressed with her translation work, and Eleanor's surprised, reminding Mr. Balmer about his promise to keep her identity under wraps, but is all like, oh, I did, but this is a big deal. You might not get to meet someone this important again, and is basically pushing her into the room where the mystery lady is waiting, telling her he's just trying to help, and Eleanor's standing at the door, looking at the lady in the mask, wondering what's going on, finally asking the lady why she's come all the way to see her, and the lady tells her to sit down first. But something about the lady's voice or demeanor strikes Elena, and she's getting a weird feeling. Eleanor's eyes widen as she recognizes the language the woman is speaking, Espida, her homeland's language, and she's wondering what the connection is, since she's supposed to be Evelyn Benedict now, not Elena de Castilla, the crown princess, and the lady's talking about how impressed she is with Eleanor's translation work, specifically Solitude, a tough book to translate, and Eleanor's surprised by how much the lady knows about her, wondering if Mr. Balmer spilled the beans, and she's downplaying her translation skills, but the lady's not having it, saying it's not something that can be done clumsily, and then she drops the bombshell. She needs a maid to assist the exiled second prince of the Espida Empire, Vicente, and Eleanor's mind is racing. The lady's explaining that Vicente broke the oath of the founding emperor, and she needs a foreigner to watch him, someone who can pretend not to know Espedian, infiltrate and report on his movements and conversations, even the gossip from other maids, and Eleanor's asking what happens if she doesn't want to do it, and the lady's all like, "Oh, I know about your sick younger sibling, and this is a great opportunity to make more money," giving her 3 days to think about it, and Elena's feeling the pressure, as the lady leaves the room, bidding her farewell, leaving Elena to process this crazy offer. Our girl's lost in thought, realizing she's been living in the dark about the Empire's news, deliberately avoiding it since she left her old life behind, but now she's faced with the shocking truth that Vicente, the son of the late emperor, has been confined, and she's thinking to herself, how did this happen? She thought the current emperor would feel guilty for stealing the throne from his nephew, Vicente, and wouldn't dare touch him, but it seems she was wrong, and Vicente's life is already in shambles, all because of her request to die. She's telling herself to stay calm, but her mind is racing. But she's also realizing that the lady knew about Cora's existence, and that the translation of solitude was just a test, meaning the lady came to her with her weakness from the very beginning. Our protagonist gets home, sees her little sister Cora reading, and calls out to her, asking if she's okay, and Cora replies that she's fine, that the nun took care of her, even brushing her teeth, and Elena's happy, relieved that Cora's doing well, and Cora asks her why she's looking so down, and our girl's thinking about how much she loves Cora, how her love for her never wavered, even when she was confused about her identity, and how Cora made her feel loved and responsible, and she's thinking that maybe it's safer to reject the lady's proposal, to just keep living quietly with Cora under the convent's care. But then she thinks about Vicente, about how he risked his life to save hers, and how she can't just leave him confined, and she's torn. Our girl's asking her little sister if she can go to Espida for a bit, just for 3 days, and she's thinking to herself that it's her turn to save the male lead this time. She feels a sense of responsibility and guilt for what happened to him. 3 days later, our protagonist is getting ready to leave for Espida, and Carter walks in, looking pretty upset, and our girl's surprised to see him. He tells her not to bother making excuses, that he's already heard everything from the nun. He knows she's going on a mission to pay for Cora's medical expenses, but is wondering why she didn't talk to him first. He tells her that if she marries him, she won't have to worry about money, and our girl's thinking, how can he say that? Carter was her lover, but his dad, the mayor, threatened her until they broke up, and now Carter's telling her not to worry, that he'll convince his dad to let them get married, but our girl's not so sure. She's feeling guilty. She doesn't want to hurt him, but she's also thinking that marrying him would be like marrying Castro all over again, a strategic marriage with no love, and she's wondering if that's even worth it. She tells him she'll consider his proposal, but only if he can really get his dad's permission. Carter's over the moon with happiness. He holds her hand and kisses it, and our girl's looking at him, thinking that even if Evelyn doesn't come back, marrying Carter would be no different from a loveless marriage, and she's wondering if love is even real. She tells him she'll be back, and then she's on her way to the palace, riding in a carriage. When they get to the gate, the guards stop them, asking what their business is, and the rider explains that they are bringing a foreign maid to work in the palace, and the guard asks if it's the woman from Britannia, and when he sees our girl, he tells them to let her through, talking to her directly. He tells her she's got work to do. Our girl's getting out of the carriage and meeting some maids outside. One of them asks if she's the person they've been expecting, and she hesitates before answering. The maid comments that it's like she really doesn't know the imperial language, and for lack of time, one of them grabs her hand and drags her inside, telling her that the Prime Minister wants to meet her personally. They get to the hall and meet the Prime Minister, Antonio, a strict-looking guy in his late 50s, he's interviewing her, asking her to confirm her name, telling her that her documents and credentials are flawless, no disqualifications, and her recommendations are decent too. He's commenting on how she traveled all the way from Britannia without knowing the imperial language, and she's explaining that a kind sister helped her, but Antonio's not totally convinced. He switches to the imperial language and tells her to stand up, and our girl's staying silent for a bit, pretending she doesn't understand, finally telling him that she doesn't know what he just said. She's getting complacent using the Britannian language, and she almost reacted to the imperial language unintentionally. She's thinking to herself that she needs to be more careful. The Prime Minister's eyes are narrowing, and he's telling her that he'll be keeping an eye on her. Our girl's trying to play it cool, but inside, she's freaking out, thinking that she almost blew her cover. Our girl's telling the Prime Minister that she can't speak a single word of the imperial language, that she's just memorized a few paragraphs, but doesn't actually know the language, and he's all like, you'll figure it out soon enough. And he's calling over one of the maids to bring her some cards and a notebook, telling her to use them for communication, and the maid's explaining to her that the cards have basic words and phrases written on them, and our girl's looking at them, thinking that this is probably just another test, but she's gonna play along. She thanks the Prime Minister, and the maid takes her to her room, chatting casually along the way, mentioning that she heard our girl speaks Britannian well, but she can't speak anything but the imperial language, and our girl's staying silent, her mind preoccupied with more important things, like how she's gonna protect the male lead without anyone finding out. The maid glances at her, wondering if she understood anything, but keeps walking, and they're moving through this grand, dimly lit hallway, and our girl's eyes land on this huge portrait of the male lead, and for a moment, she feels like she's really here, in the middle of all this power and danger, and she's thinking about the madam's mission, but also her own secret mission to protect the male lead, and she's trying to stay focused. But then she hears someone calling her name sharply, and she's snapped back to reality. Girl's being snapped back to reality by the sound of another maid calling her, and she's turning to see who it is, and the maid's taking her hand and telling her to follow her, saying there's no one around right now, and they're going into a room and closing the door, and our girl's asking what's going on, and the maid's covering her mouth and telling her not to be surprised, and introducing herself as Maria, and our girl's remembering what the madam told her about finding Maria, and Maria's telling her that now that she's revealed her identity, there's no need to be on guard when they're together, and she's taking her hands off her mouth and asking if our girl is the person who's going to help her, and Maria's telling her to speak in the imperial language only, since everyone uses it as a basic language, and our girl's thanking her for the advice, and Maria's telling her not to mention it, that it's just part of her job, and she's telling her that they should meet every Saturday, at 7 p.m., in the same location, and our girl's asking if she should still do that even if there's nothing to report, and Maria's saying yes, that from now on, she'll only contact the lady through her, and she's giving her a maid's outfit and a dagger, and our girl's surprised, asking why she's giving her a dagger, and Maria's not really explaining, just telling her to stay loyal to money when she's confused, and our girl's thinking about how she can now afford her brother's medicine, and she's reminding herself not to forget that she's a good sister, and she's tying the dagger to her lap and covering it with her gown, and she's feeling a knot in her stomach from guilt, thinking about how Vicente's trapped in the palace because of her, and he's bearing the burden of a crime he didn't commit, and she's wondering if coming here was the right thing to do, but she just hopes that the male lead can be a little happier, and not be in a situation where his life's at risk every moment. Our girl's starting her first day of work with the other maids, and she's trying to blend in, but two of the maids are gossiping near her, thinking she can't understand them, because she's a foreigner. They're complaining about having to clean the West Wing, which is used by nobles, but they're wondering what's the point since it's like a place of exile with no visitors. One of them notices our girl listening and wonders if she heard everything, but the other maid's not worried, saying our girl doesn't understand the imperial language at all. They call out to her and ask for the communication cards, and our girl's using them to communicate, but one of the maids notices that a card has been mixed up, and Maria's saying that our girl can't be helped if she can't understand the language, adding that the head maid told her not to take it easy on our girl. It seems like they're testing her. Our girl's walking away to her assigned location with her cleaning materials, expecting this kind of hassle, knowing it might take weeks or months to gain their trust. She's prepared to be tested. As she walks along the hallway, she notices a room with the door open, and she stops, wondering why it's open when it should be closed. The madam's words are ringing in her head, telling her to find the second prince's subversiveness. She walks slowly to the door, knowing the lady was certain Vicente was hiding something. If there's evidence of treason, she needs to destroy it. She opens the door and walks in, looking around, but there's no sign of noise. It's not even the fourth floor where the crown prince is staying. She wonders if she overreacted, decides to take a quick look around, gets to the table, and her eyes catch some notes, wondering what they are, examining them, she realizes it's a promissory note for a large loan, and she's thinking to herself, what's this all about? Elena's eyes widen as she looks at the amount on the promissory note, thinking to herself that there's no way this huge amount of money would be used for good. It must be military funding, and she's afraid, wondering if Vicente, who's always been loyal to the imperial family, is really preparing for a rebellion. She's lost in thought when someone grabs her from behind, and she's shocked, dropping the pail of water on the floor. She turns around and sees Vicente himself, the second prince. He's telling her that he's never seen her before, and Elena's recognizing his voice, the elegant accent, and his height. It's definitely Vicente. He's urging her to answer him, asking whose orders she's following, and Elena's silent, standing still, thinking that she knew she'd eventually meet the male lead, but not like this. It's too late to make excuses. The water spilled all over the floor, and she knows that if she uses the Espida language, she'll be in trouble. Vicente's still waiting for her response, telling her that keeping silent won't help. He holds her face and turns her around, and Elena speaks in Britannian, but he doesn't understand. She can't reveal that she's Elena, not yet. She's thinking that once she helps with the restoration, she'll disappear. Vicente turns her fully and looks into her eyes, searching for answers. Vicente's commenting that he's done all sorts of tricks to get her to speak, but Elena's still not saying a word. She looks at him fully, and he's so different from her last memory. He was noble and quiet, flawless, but now there's this dry atmosphere around him. He brings her closer, putting his hand under her gown, searching for something, and Elena's caught off guard. She tells him to let her go, but he finds the dagger and brings it out, commenting that she's a stubborn one. Elena's frightened, feeling like this is getting too dangerous. She thinks to herself that she didn't want to go this far, but there's no other way to escape. She pushes him away, screaming for help. Vicente calls for Maria to come right away. The dagger falls to the floor, and Maria walks in, calling Elena's name, asking her what's happening. Noticing Vicente, she prostrates herself, asking him what's wrong. Vicente asks Maria who Elena is, and Maria explains that she's a new maid from Britannia, who doesn't know the imperial language. Vicente looks on, still silent. Everything about Elena annoys him, her face, her expressions, even her black hair and grey eyes, remind him of Elena. He feels nauseated thinking about why she was brought here. Elena picks up the dagger from the floor. Vicente turns to Maria, asking her to take Elena away, commenting that it's hard to believe she really doesn't understand a word. He looks at Elena suspiciously, saying he'll have to check it himself. The male lead's sitting in his study, asking the Prime Minister for the scoop on our girl, and the Prime Minister's telling him that he's thoroughly reviewed all her documents, and everything checks out. But the male lead still got his doubts, thinking that she might be connected to Castro, and that's a major red flag. It's been 10 years since his father passed away, and Castro stripped him of his prince title, leaving him alone. His mom's in a convent, Elena's gone, and even the Prime Minister, who he used to trust, is now suspect. There's a letter on his desk, written to the Emperor, saying that the male lead won't find out about some secret info, but has already figured out that the Prime Minister's loyal to Castro, and that's a major betrayal. The male lead tells the Prime Minister that our girl's a maid he personally selected, and the Prime Minister's surprised, trying to play it cool, but the male lead's not having it. He's telling him that if our girl turns out to be a threat, the Prime Minister will be the first one interrogated. He's throwing away the paper, standing up, telling him that he's the only family he's got left, and he wants to protect him. The Prime Minister's apologizing, but the male lead's still not convinced. He's got doubts about our girl, and he can't trust anyone in the palace. He tells the Prime Minister to let her know that he wants to see her, and starting tomorrow, she'll be attending all his classes. He's gonna keep a close eye on her. The Prime Minister's surprised, asking the male lead if he's planning to bring the maid to his study, and he's like, if surveillance is the goal, can't he just handle it? Why does the male lead want to keep her by his side? And the male lead's all, are you uncomfortable with a maid coming and going in a place where you can't easily assess? And the minister's like, that's not what I meant. And the male lead's patting him on the shoulder, telling him not to worry, he just needs to check something, that's all. He's thinking that the possibility of her being related to the prince is slim. Later that evening, the male lead's thinking about our girl, Evelyn Benedict, and his like, she seems to understand their language, but there's no trace of her learning the imperial language. But if she only learned the imperial language, that would make her a spy who wouldn't be suspected by anyone, and his thinking that he believes she's not connected to Castro, because if Castro had found her, he would have been in his bedroom by now, not in exile. Leads walking into his room, opening his drawer, and pulling out a blood-stained material, and his thinking that our girl resembles Elena so much it's unbearable. But this can also be an opportunity. If that maid becomes his weakness, it will become Castro's weakness too, and he's smiling at the thought, feeling like luck's finally on his side. Years ago, when Elena was young, she's lying in bed, and an elderly woman's trying to wake her up, begging her to get up, and Elena's waking up immediately, stopping her, telling her not to go, that her father wouldn't like it, and the woman's urging her to take some medicine and rest, saying that today's morning class will start late. Our girl's lost in thought, remembering Hilda Lundgren, her childhood nursemaid, who was like a mom to her, and had this special ability to hear and see things that no one else could, and our girl's thinking about how she was the only one who took Hilda's words seriously back then. She lies back on the bed, asking the nurse if she'll stay by her side even when she sleeps, and the nurse is all comforting, telling her to rest well, holding her hand, and telling her to keep enduring, that her strength is tied tightly, and that eventually, a new beginning will come, in a new place, with a new body. Back to the present, it's morning, and Maria's calling our girl's name, waking her up with a start, telling her to come out quickly, that the master's calling for her, and our girl's getting dressed in a flash, about to ask Maria why the master wants her, but Maria's cutting her off, telling her to ditch the foreign language, saying it seems urgent, so they should go ASAP. Our girl's following Maria silently, wondering why Maria's attitude has changed so much since yesterday's incident. She's thinking maybe she acted rashly, or maybe it's personal. Usually she'd be angry too, but now she's just confused, thinking about the dream Hilda had, wondering what it meant, what new beginning is coming, and why she forgot about it until now. But if Hilda really said that, she's got to find her, without anyone knowing. They arrive at the hall, where the Prime Minister's waiting, and our girl greets him, asking if he's looking for her urgently, and he's all, yes, I've got tasks for you from now on. The Prime Minister's dropping a bombshell, telling our girl that she'll be attending the prince's classes from now on, and that she'll need to prep the carriage for him daily at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m., and since she can't speak the imperial language, she'll have to stick by the prince's side. The other maids are gossiping, shocked that she's going to serve the prince directly. They're angry, thinking it's so typical of a lady from Britannia. Our girl can hear them, but she's not surprised. She expected this kind of reaction. Since no one understands her, it puts her in a tough spot. What's really bothering her is that despite leaving a bad first impression, the prince personally chose her. It's like he's urging her to steal info. The Prime Minister notices she's spaced out and asks if she's listening. She apologizes and asks him to repeat himself. He hands her a key, telling her to take it to the study, and that there are only 3 keys in total, one for her, one for the prince, and the last one is for whatever she wants. He warns her to be careful where she uses it. Meanwhile, the prince is watching them from the top floor. The Prime Minister's telling our girl that she'll be in charge of all activities on the 4th floor from now on. She bows, saying she'll remember that. It's actually a lucky break. She'll be under surveillance, but it means she'll get closer to the male lead faster. She thinks to herself that the more obvious the surveillance is, the more the lady of the house will trust her loyalty, without realizing she's poisonous. Just as our girl's about to walk away, the Prime Minister stops her, asking if she's ever lied to him before. Our girl turns around, wondering what's going on. Our girl pauses, then speaks, asking the Prime Minister to repeat himself in Britannian, and he walks closer, threatening her, telling her that if she ever hesitates, even for a second, her head will be blown off. Our girl's surprised. She thought the doubts about her had diminished, but instead, she's getting blatant threats. Even if Maria didn't spread rumors, the palace has dozens of eyes and ears, each serving a different master. So the rumors must be spreading. Our girl decides not to appear agitated. Instead, she looks sullen. One of the male lead's knights approaches her, asking if she's okay, commenting that her complexion looks bad. He looks at her, realizes she's the one from Britannia, and tries to form a sentence using the communication cards, asking her again in her language, wondering if he's saying it right. Our girl still silent, relieved that the situation didn't last long. She looks at the knight, thinking about how the male lead's knights decreased in number after he was imprisoned, but the male lead's still a soldier at heart, commanding his knights, while Castro's off, enjoying pleasures, accumulating merit, and making a name for himself. Our girl thinks to herself that the current emperor system won't last forever. The male lead will be restored. So until then, she'll remove useless data, select the info that must be leaked safely. Through everything she can do, she looks at the male lead's portrait, speaking to it, saying she'll protect him. 10 days have passed, and our girl's standing at the male lead's door, ready to serve him tea, but two knights, Dante and Lucas, are interrogating her. One of them thinks it's pointless since she doesn't know the imperial language, but Lucas says it's what their captain ordered, and our girl's looking at them, thinking about how loyal they are to the male lead, having volunteered to be imprisoned with him. Lucas teases Dante about his size, saying our girl won't be able to pass through the door, and Dante agrees. Our girl thinks they are innocent and playful, and she never knew they had this side to them. As she passes them, Dante comments that he has no idea what she's thinking, and they wonder why she's needed on the 4th floor. One of them says she looks like that person. Our girl walks into the study with a tray, looks around, and thinks it's a dreary day. The palace is cold and dark. She places the drink on the table, and notices the room looks like an abandoned prison. She stops suddenly, seeing that the male lead's drawer is slightly open. It's as if they forgot to lock it. She remembers attending his classes when they were young, and the teacher talking about strategies to bring someone you can't trust into your plans. She looks at the drawer, thinking it's a test to trap her, probably with fake important documents. She opens the drawer, and sees her picture. She's surprised. It's her and the material. The door opens behind her, and she turns quickly. It's the male lead. He asks her what she's looking at, comes in with a glass of drink, and calls her Lady Benedict. The male lead's commenting that he guesses she's not hardened by the situation. He's coming closer, carrying the tea, telling her it's cold, handing it to her to drink, asking for her opinion, then remembering she can't speak. She's cleaning her mouth with the back of her hand, and he's got that spicy brandy breath, a sign that he still can't sleep without booze and drugs. She's taking the tray away, telling him the tea's cold now, offering to prep it again, and walking out. As she's walking away, she's thinking, it wasn't an illusion. The male lead really shed tears because of her. He felt that way because of her. She's sad about his situation, thinking it'd be fine if he killed her, believing they'd both lose their purpose. It's a pretty dark thought. Stay. Our girl's with Maria, who's asking about her assignment, wondering if she's found anything interesting. Maria's surprised it's been over 10 days since the tea party. She's commenting that the Duchess is waiting for info, wondering if our girl's not planning to extract any information. Our girl's telling her the prince isn't that kind of person, keeping his docs locked away, spreading them out like he's daring her to take them. But nobody can confirm the truth. She's the only one who can go in and out of the study, thinking the prince still needs to test her, saying there's been no progress. Maria's telling her she doesn't feel sorry for spreading rumors that our girl seduced the prince. Our girl's looking at her confused, wondering why she's bringing this up. Maria's continuing, saying people in the palace have desperate reasons, like death or sick family members. It's a pretty intense conversation. Our girl's still lost, trying to follow Maria's conversation. Maria's saying she wasn't always like this, that she didn't plan to fall for the prince, but is like fate, carved by God, and sometimes she feels like she's got a devil in her. Our girl's telling her to calm down, but Maria's dropping a bombshell, saying guests are coming to the palace tomorrow, and our girl's wondering how the prince, who's under house arrest, can accept guests. Maria's cutting her off, reminding her why the male lead's under house arrest, that he killed the crown prince's woman, and that the crown prince is sending guards, disguised as guests, to find fault. Maria's saying she sometimes envies that woman, who dared to hurt the prince. Maria's holding an envelope, saying the male lead told her to hide it in his study before the guests arrive tomorrow. Our girl's asking what it is. Maria's saying she doesn't know. Maybe it's treason evidence. Our girl's surprised, asking Maria what she's doing. Maria's proposing they forget about the fabricated evidence, handing our girl a small sack of poison, telling her to mix it with the tea she'll serve tomorrow, threatening to tell the Duchess that our girl's seducing the male lead if she doesn't comply. The next day, our girl's serving the male lead. Having put a little of the poison in the tea, she's deep in thought, thinking that if the evidence is found in the male lead's study, he'll be framed for treason, but if she says poison was found in his carriage beforehand, she can warn him and draw attention to herself. Plus, the poison Maria gave her is one the royal family's immune to. So the male lead will be safe, and he'll notice the poison because of its distinctive taste. Our girls, thinking that Maria must have given her the poison knowing it wouldn't harm the male lead, and that she's trying to help her, but our girl's still unsure. She's watching the male lead, waiting for his reaction. Our girl's thinking that whether she follows Maria's instructions or not, the Duchess will still suspect her, and the male lead will never trust her if she tries to kill him again. She's telling herself not to be afraid, that there was only one choice from the start. She enters the room, sees the male lead with a guest, and is happy the tea has arrived, commenting that even though he's confined, he can't refuse tea to someone as esteemed as the Grand Master of the Knights. As she walks closer, the elderly man looks at her, trying to recognize her. He tries to say something, but the male lead cuts him off, asking if she looks like Elena. The man says yes. Our girl's tensed up, dropping the tray with the tea. The old man notices, commenting that if she's worried about what he said, she shouldn't be, because it's a futile effort. The male lead waits for her response, but informs the Grand Master that she doesn't understand their language. The male lead looks at her, disappointed, thinking she could have been useful with some training, but here she is, trembling like a leaf over a suspicious-smelling cup of tea. She's pouring the tea, deep in thought, thinking that being ordered to do something openly is so dangerous. It means she's been abandoned by her mastermind. What a shame. The male lead urges the Grand Master to continue what he was saying. Our girl sees some communication cards on the table, picks them up, and reads them. They say she's supposed to taste anything she brings first. As it's the custom, she picks up one of the cups and starts drinking. The male lead's surprised, asking her what she's doing. He's alert, standing up to meet her. She starts to get weak, and he has to hold her. The Grand Master examines the tea, discovers it's cura poison. Our girl starts to lose consciousness, vomiting blood. The male lead's commenting that commoners aren't immune to cura, and she drank the whole cup. She's getting weaker in his arms. With her last breath, she calls him by his name. He immediately orders them to call the royal physician. The Grand Master's surprised, reminding him it's against protocol for the royal physician to attend to anyone but the royal family. The male lead's not having it, saying a human being just collapsed in front of him, and she drank the poison meant for him. He's basically saying that human life is more important than some petty rule. The Grand Master quickly agrees, saying he'll go get the physician right away. The male lead still holding her, thinking about her pale face, trembling breath, and the way she was looking at him. He's starting to understand, wondering if that was a plea for her life. Our girl's lying on the bed in the male lead's chambers, still unconscious. The male lead, Prime Minister, and Grand Master are all there. The Prime Minister's saying she must have been in contact with the person who ordered the assassination, that she should be treated as a key witness. The male lead's all like, the witness saved my life, can't we compromise? The Prime Minister's acknowledging her contribution, but also saying she's the one who brought the deadly poison. It's suspicious that she came to see him with poison in the first place.